Something just seems a bit off about this Trump assassination attempt. Obviously, this is being talked about a lot now. There are different conspiracy theories that are swirling around. There are lots of new information that's coming out day by day. But in general, a very general, middle of the line consensus is this is just kind of mind-boggling that this happened. So you can obviously see the details in the news headlines. You can, listen to how different media or YouTube content creators are covering this topic. In this video, what I basically want to do is just summarize what's been said and kind of focus on how some of the biggest independent media channels, alternative news outlets, which people watch mostly on YouTube. It's not like they're on cable television, but it's kind of surprising to me about how hostile they are to questioning this. Like the same old, you're a conspiracy nut, insane to think that there's anything more to this. Whereas I think if you are actually, focused on the bigger picture and are just a critical thinker, open-minded, and not just going to listen to what pundits and people in the media and authority figures are saying about things and just think about it for yourself, you have every reason to question this. There's a lot of questions that have gone unanswered. And there's also, if you've done more research into a lot of other things, like the types of mind control technologies that were worked on in the 1950s to the 70s in MK Ultra, and to kind of what I think is naively assume that those just stopped in the 1970s, just like all our other technologies, and who knows what is classified. There's a lot of things that are possible that we wouldn't think are, but actually can be verified, for example, by some information that's come out through Freedom of Information Act requests and patents and testimony of high-level people, specifically in regards, which I'll touch on briefly in this, of something like the Manchurian Candidate, which is, programming somebody to carry out an assassination. And I'll get the screen share going here. And on that note, now again, I'm not going to here try to claim that I think this was a Manchurian Candidate scenario, but we have to think of all possibilities. And you can read up on that. One of the greatest cases in history for the Manchurian Candidate, mind programming that the CIA apparently developed with efficacy was with Saran. You can look at the Robert Kennedy assassination, and there's just a lot of sketchy things about this case. I actually think it's a more clear-cut case than the Kennedy one, personally. And so there's things like mind programming, where they found journals of his where he was writing the same thing over and over again. And apparently that was one of the techniques that they figured out in the Manchurian Candidate programming. And you can actually read the details about this I read this way back in the day in Jesse Ventura's book, American Conspiracies. And you look at the details and all of the facts and the sources cited, and that is an interesting case study of the potential that lone nut assassins, right? Who this guy, Thomas Crooks, Trump's, shooter, was again another lone nut assassin. And it's always that. Ventura was one of the first to really, in the mainstream, really question that and try to show research and evidence of how groups like the CIA, utilize that perhaps to carry out certain agendas. This lone nut assassin. The MLK assassination was also super sketchy in the same way. Malcolm X. There are others, right? besides the famous John F. Kennedy. So anyway, that's all context, right? So let's get in here and let's talk about what people are saying. Okay, obviously Trump was shot. To be honest with you, and this is what's so interesting about it to me, right? Is it's like, okay, this happened, and now how is the public gonna process this, right? And how are the details going to be communicated to us, and how are we going to process this? This is a big, huge event, right? And you know, when I saw it, right, and you'll see in one of the videos, or in one of these videos, people are ridiculing people questioning it because they say they just have a feeling, right? But let's keep in mind that the human vessel, if you will, the mind, we think analytically, we think logically, we think in terms of words and concepts, right? But we do know there are limits to what we know about. And we know there are phenomena that seem unexplainable, like psychic phenomena, something like intuition, right? Gut feeling. Some argue that this is actually a skill and a capacity we have, but that we don't really tap into it because we see it as like, oh, intuition. It's not material. It's not firm, scientific. But I do think that you should always take that into consideration. And sometimes you might be wrong, and that's okay. But so anyway, and it's just interesting because multiple people I've spoken to, two of my students that are in high school, and also a couple of other peers of mine, had this same gut initial reaction of like seeing the headline, seeing the picture, seeing the video, and just being like, just seems like it's got some type of air to it, like that it's not fully what it's being presented as, and I felt like this just seems fake, and I'm talking about literally like 10 seconds of just looking at it, and then the first day it happened, right? The photo, right? I mean, it's just like crazy, right? But then you start to get the details, right? And in my opinion, you rule out that it was fake, pretty much right away, because there was another spectator that was shot and killed. The guy that shot him was killed. There's pictures or video of the bullet grazing Trump. There's also the gas on the construction equipment behind him. The piston got hit and sprayed out gas. You can see that video. You can hear the gunshots in the video. 2 people were injured. So, we obviously within the first day, you could rule out that it was faked. Okay. But now the question out there is, was it staged? Right? Was it staged? And by who and why? Right? So I'm going to just run through, some of the videos I've watched, just my YouTube history here. Here's the former Secret Service agent, and he was interviewed by a news station, and he was just saying, "Look, this is impossible that this kid was able to climb up on the rooftop and get a clear shot, and I'm going to show you how close he was. It's 150 yards away, but when you get the visual, it becomes even more shocking, right? And in fact, let's jump right into that. Let me show you the videos here. All right, now, as you can see here, here's the shooter, and very close to what's happening. And then here's the rooftops where the Secret Service snipers were stationed, literally pointing, you can see right there, and looking right at this guy. And different information is coming out, but it's been verified pretty much that it was at least a full 2 minutes that they had identified him on the roof with a weapon, with a rifle, and nothing was done. There's a lot of details, right? You can scoop these all up. I don't want to go into all of them here. And off the top of my head, he had a rangefinder when he checked into the event hours before. He was identified as a suspicious person and reported, and within the Secret Service knowledge, hours before the shooting. He was there days before. He just came out recently. He was flying a drone either right before the event or like minutes before Trump's speech or something. He had the rangefinder. They let him in with it, right? He was seen lurking around. He was seen climbing up the roof, and people were shouting and saying he's got a gun. All this stuff. And nothing was done, right? Nothing was done. I'm going to show you another picture now. This is a great perspective here because this is minutes before the shot. And you see right there, right? You can see that this rooftop right here is where the shooter was. I mean, it's almost like Trump could just see it himself. Not to mention behind him, what you saw in the other picture, you had multiple Secret Service sniper units staring out there. You had a clear line of sight to this kid. They should have seen him the second he got up on the roof. Then you hear the story that when he was up on the roof, a police officer climbed up there and he threatened the police officer, and the police officer went away and then like hurt his ankle. Like, there's just so many things. It's like, what? It's wild. And so, and nobody's, being shy about that. The mainstream media and everybody. That this just doesn't add up, right? It's mind-boggling. It's impossible that this could happen, as the Secret Service agent said, right? Nobody's disagreeing about that. This is just, it's mind-boggling that this could possibly happen. But what the default, explanation is, which it absolutely may just be, is that this is just negligence and, gross incompetence, which is certainly possible. But, what else could it be? What else could it be? And, what I find interesting is that people who are questioning it and wondering if there's foul play, if there's something more sinister behind it, if there was something planned, staged, or, some type of conspiracy, and how media, especially the independent, right, media that's supposed to be, countering the mainstream media's bias, is, just really ridiculing and deriding anybody who is questioning it. Now, to Joe Rogan's credit, and obviously he's an important, media personality with the Joe Rogan podcast, to his credit, he's been questioning it, and saying how it's plausible that it could have been plotted by someone, right? Now let's get this straight, right? The first couple popular ones that came out were, Biden had this done to get rid of Trump. And then the other ones, Trump did this to, get the picture and get the support and win the election, right? And people are focusing on that, slamming those conspiracy theories. Well, I mean, those are very simple-minded, and I would rule those both out. Okay, the Biden one I'd rule out right away, because number one, the president, right, seeing what the deeper power structure is that's controlling things, the puppet strings of this whole thing, right? And if you think that there's not, I think that's just kind of silly. Like, there just is, It doesn't need to be some like occult, like Illuminati type of thing, but there's a group of people who know that they have power, who are not ones that need to get reelected every so often. They're in the different industries that move around and interlock: banking, military, industrial complex, government, everything, right? And, they are very, very capable of orchestrating things. And there are sinister people. We know this, and there are sinister groups. The other conspiracies have been proven as fact through history now, especially in the internet age, especially after the Freedom of Information Act in the 70s and so forth, right? And the research that's been done since then. All right, but look, I mean, Biden is not going to order this, okay? He doesn't have that kind of power. Biden is, let's assume that this control group that's wielding power behind the scenes and doing things like, covering up UFOs and whatever else, it's not going to be Biden's plot. Okay. So just forget about that. And I don't even think, Biden would do something that bold, like try to have him assassinated. And, also you can rule the Trump one out, because even though I wouldn't put that past Trump, because I don't know the man. I mean, right? We know he's unhinged. If he were to say, hey, look, if you do this, you could, your election for you is a shoo-in, right? We're just going to set this up. We're going to stage it. But I'm going to rule that out, because he, really, I mean, seems like we're almost at 100%. Like he really was shot by a bullet in the ear, right? And even if that was staged and Trump was willing to get hit in the ear and let another person in the crowd die and 2 other people get injured, right? Which is crazy, but still possible. You don't know. This man could be the sickest, sociopath, psychopath, narcissist. And, it's totally possible. I mean, there's people that assassinate people. There could be people that say, yeah, I don't care. It's for the greater good. And even just to really play devil's advocate, he even says, all right, if I die, then so what, right? I don't think that. I mean, I'm thinking that that's very low likelihood. So you can rule out that Trump had it planned for his own benefit. Because again, if this shooter missed, then he's dead, right? Maybe if this was like a top sniper marksman, then maybe Trump would be like, all right, yeah, I trust our men, like hit me in the ear, right? But it's not some 20-year-old random kid. So wasn't Trump. All right. And when we get to like these people here, and I'll play you just, how biased this is. And this is big, right? They're like independent, like anti-establishment group, YouTube media channel, the Young Turks, 6 million subscribers. And they're just like so hostile on conspiracy theories about this, right? Like
the conspiracies are kind of driving me crazy. Okay. And there are conspiracy theorists on both sides of the political aisle. Both sides seem to think that it was staged, but staged for different reasons. Okay. So there are Democratic voters who genuinely think that the assassination,
and then they just go on to ridicule it. And then, he comes in.
And it was because I was on the Republican Congress perimeter check. I'm like, you don't even know that they did. People saw the shooter climb up onto the roof. That means he climbed up onto the roof very, very recently. So they might have done a perimeter check earlier.
And he basically tries to like apologize for the Secret Service, like, oh, it's not that normal, right? It's not that like crazy that this happened. Like it could have happened in between their perimeter checks, right? And I mean, listen to this guy Chen Unger, or listen to like the former Secret Service agents who are saying like this should be impossible for this to happen. Also, like, do you really even need to listen to them? Like, it's absurd. You said his conspiracy theories are absurd. That this happened is absurd. I mean, we just looked at the picture, right? Like, he's literally like right there on the roof. He was seen hours before. People yelling at him. He's just like a guy going up on our roof and like has a rifle, and he just gets a clear shot at Trump. Like that's absurd, right? And yes, it may just be unthinkable incompetence and negligence. That's probably the best theory at this point. But if like, I mean, look, if the powers that be, whoever they really are, right? And as Colonel Fletcher Prouty, right? Not to go on too much of a side note here, but this is important, right? This guy was basically, he was the chief of special operations in the Joint Chiefs of Staff. And his job was to oversee the CIA in a very critical period in history, like from like 55 to the early 60s. And he wrote this book called The Secret Team. And he basically says, he found from his, close contact to the system and the CIA and everything that like there's a secret group. Look, the CIA and its allies that control the world, right? I mean, this guy was highly credible, was right there front and center in a need to know position. And, one of the things he said was they are anonymous and that is their strength and they know it, right? So if something like this were to be staged or planned or something, of course we would never ever know who did it. And just the same way that, like, I mean, it's obvious that whatever the truth is about the UFO thing, it's being concealed and obfuscated by someone. Like, who are these people, right? And Colonel Fletcher Prouty says that their anonymity is their strength. Okay, so I think we have to keep that in mind. And to that point, right? It's very naive and narrow-minded of Chen Unger here, and how he analyzes the situation, because he says, look, I know how the establishment politics works, and you would never do something like this, that would make you look bad. Like, dude, obviously, if Trump or Biden was planning an assassination, first of all, I don't, like I said, neither of them, I don't think it's very plausible that they would. But even if they did, like, do you think they'd leave a paper trail, bro? Like, and that's going to be your arguing point of why these conspiracy theories are insane, is because the paper trail would ruin their career. Like, dude, there wouldn't be a paper trail, So moving along here, I think it's interesting to note, like, Trump's son and what he had to say. Let's listen.
In a moment, but here's Don Jr.
Having had it, having been in it, having been both my father as a president, as a candidate, my own details, someone to get out on an open roof within 130 yards. I'm not going to be the guy to be conspiratorial, but something went wrong.
Now,
so, and I actually, to his credit, I mean, I don't know anything about this guy. He may be like, people might hate him and he might be like a bad dude. I don't know anything about Trump's son here, but I think that's very reasonable what he's saying, right? And that's the point. It's like, something's off, like, use common sense, right? Is it really that they're that incompetent, right? And we look at the long history of all these shady, sketchy details about these assassination attempts with CIA involvement and whatnot. Okay, so if something was planned about this, if something was designed, staged, if it was allowed to happen, right? Which, seeing the details accumulate and thinking about some of the details that we've shared here, I personally leaning towards, if we say for a minute, all right, it wasn't just that they were so incompetent and failed, there was something else to it. It seems, high on the likelihood list to me at this point would be that it was allowed to kind of happen. And perhaps these Secret Service agents were compromised in some way. How would that work? I mean, who knows, right? Again, like, go out on a limb here. Most people would say that sounds crazy, but just look at the documentation. Like, there are mind control techniques, right? Who knows? It's like, who knows what is possible? Who knows what type of psychological operation could be done to make those, Secret Service agents look the other way or ignore it or wait. It's like, you look at the video, like, the dude has the sniper on the shooter, and then right after the shooter pulls the trigger, then he shoots him dead. So, like, they had him locked in, right? Like, what's going on here? Like, it's just, something is off about it. Something's off about it, and people should demand answers. And these Secret Service agents should be investigated. Everything. But what I find interesting is, like, how the independent media is just so hostile to questioning this. Like, I thought your job was to be to, like, question how we're being programmed by the mainstream media. Watch a few seconds of this one here. Another big independent media outlet, popular on YouTube, The Hill.
I hate the idea that it could have been something that was planned and he wasn't working alone and it had something to do with Iran, it had something to do with the CIA. I don't like any of those prospects, but as soon as people saw the transmitter, everyone was asking questions. It seems to me that there's a suspicious lack of evidence as to who this guy was. 27 contacts is not very many.
Well, I mean, that tells you something, right?
It does tell you something, right? So it's one of two
loner,
things.
Loser,
right.
Which is the exact kind of person who commits these. Well,
but what I would say is.
So yeah, I mean, and this just, like, this conversation becomes, like, cringy. I mean, the woman on the left she's pretty like reasonable, I think, in what I've seen from her. They fired the other woman that was there, Brianna Joy, because she was criticizing Israel. But anyway, and this guy on the right, though, is like cringy to me. But yeah, I mean, she starts to bring up the dialogue, and then what does he do? Calls the shooter a pathetic loser loner, right? Like, because that's what we need, right? We have these mass shooters who clearly are having some type of issue, whether they're bullied or whatever it is, or they're outcast, and they shoot up public places, or trying to shoot a president. Someone got killed in the crowd, so yeah, let's just keep calling them pathetic losers, right? It's just like, what? And they don't really have much of a constructive conversation there. And look, I mean, yeah, she says Iran. I don't, Iran, that seems far-fetched. The CIA, totally within their reason, right? And what makes this like such a puzzle, right, is like this guy, Thomas Crooks, like 20 years old. And to be honest with you, right, if the CIA or someone like the CIA, right, like a black CIA, meaning like a group like the CIA that's like off the grid, or like who even knows, you know what I mean? Nobody knows about them. They're anonymous, just like Colonel Fletcher Prouty said. They could have totally pulled this off, man. And they don't, and they're allegedly sociopathic, psychopathic. Like, people say the CIA, people that got recruited by the CIA have said that they recruit people that are, have a sociopathic tendency, because you have to be able to do things that like just kill someone. And so, yeah, would they allow an innocent bystander to die and 2 to get injured? And the chance that Trump could get killed if the shot was to observe? Of course, right? Of course. It's completely possible that a group like that could have plotted something like this, and it would be very smart for it to be this random lone nut kid, 20-year-old kid, right? It would be smart for all of that, right? To have multiple shots, so people can't write it off as fake. But what's the motive, right? Well, that you can just speculate, right? I mean, it's perfectly plausible that whoever is behind the scenes, if there is this secret team, right, said, you know what, we're gonna have some kid try to assassinate Trump, and is gonna hit him in the ear, right? We're gonna mind control, train a Manchurian candidate to aim at the ear. We're gonna make sure that Secret Service lets him get that first shot off. Boom, right? And then and Trump's gonna win now because we want Trump in, right? Or they could have said, and if he gets killed, then whatever, we have a contingency plan. Another possible thing is the secret team, whoever that could be, right, just actually wanted Trump dead, and so they said, we're going to assassinate him. What's the best way to do this? Well, we got to get the lone nut psycho, right? That could never be tied to anything. And then they Manchurian candidate this guy, and they also somehow pull the strings to let the Secret Service just kind of let him get that first shot off, and the kid missed. Okay, and it didn't work, right? They didn't hit him. You would think that they would choose someone who's a better shooter if they really wanted him dead, though. So, and now I'm just speculating here, right? Of what's possible, right? Because like, look, if this was like some design thing by this secret team of the most powerful people with the greatest resources, right? I mean, look, there's not going to be any evidence for it. It's not going to be easy to be like, oh, this was staged, this was fake, right? Or this was plotted. And I think we should question it, right? I think we really should, because there are sinister people who are doing sinister things. I mean, look, someone's trying to cover up whatever the truth is, whether it's BS or not, that they've got 80 years of crashed alien spaceships and alien bodies, right? So if they can keep that from the public, I mean, whoever they are, like, really don't think that they could have had this arranged for this assassination attempt to occur. And I'll end on this, right? If you go a layer deeper into like the idea that like these people, right? Imagine there's like a small group of people really with the power, like pulling the strings of this whole thing, like this all a show, right? You go to like the Shakespeare quote, all the world's a stage, right? And it could just be like they're just having fun, like they're bored, they have all the money, all the power they could ever get, and they're just like having fun. It's like a video game to them, right? Like, oh, let's have an assassination attempt, and that'll add some like they could just be having fun. And like, could we do this? They could be like trying things. Like this could have been like an experiment. You know what I mean? Like you can't put it past these kind of people. And yes, we go to the CIA because they have the paper trail of the history of doing very sinister things, like, and have been caught again and again, like MK Ultra, and so on and so forth, torturing, innocent people with the Guantanamo Bay and all that. So yes, it's something that's possible, and it's 2024 now. We know about things they were doing in the 50s, 60s, 70s to early 2000s, right? Like who knows what kind of mind programming and technology, they have voice to skull technology. I mean, who knows? It's like, who knows? Like we're the ones ignorant here. And so I think we should question it. And so I'll end on this note, right? Is like the dude's name is Thomas Crooks, like Crooks. And, there are those like deep conspiracy theorists that, get into like the symbology and the words and the things, like David Icke saying like this is part of like their occult ritual, is like leaving some things that make it obvious, or like putting it right in your face as like a joke, right? Like, I mean, Thomas Crooks, right? That's the guy. The whole thing is just very weird to me, and who knows, so those are the thoughts about it. Again, key takeaways for me is like, I think it's wild how independent media is just so hostile towards questioning if this could be something more than just negligence. I think right now, given all the information, probably most plausible thing is, I guess, I mean, it seems hard to call it plausible, is just total negligence and failure of the Secret Service. And that's possible, but you're already seeing conflicting statements by them. For example, one person was interviewed, just watching this like an hour ago, one person was interviewed saying, one expert, right, in the Secret Service or whatever, was interviewed saying, oh no, we wouldn't go there before the event. We would just go there in the morning, the day of. And then I seen another video in an article, someone of authority saying that the local police department said that the Secret Service was there a month before and told them exactly what was going to happen and what was going to happen and like what their job was. So, you're getting conflicting information. And ultimately it's going to be up to you, right? Is like, how plausible do you think it is that the Secret Service could just totally fail? I mean, again, the dude was right on the rooftop right there. And they had a full 2 minutes of this guy sitting there getting a location on Trump. At the very least, right? At the very least, you call down to the Secret Service down by the podium and you get Trump off the stage. Dude, even if he didn't have a weapon and someone was on the roof, like, you would get the guy off stage. Like, it's wild, man. It's wild. And because, we're so stigmatized to conspiracies for the most part in terms of how the official, processing of events is, people are going to cling to this is just negligence and incompetence until the last day. And there'll never be any compelling evidence that something sinister happened behind the scenes, But look, I mean, it seems like the Secret Service agent said, impossible. And so you have to ask, what is this? And again, I've told you what I think. I think if it's not just some chaotic thing that happened and horrible incompetence by the Secret Service, which is possible. I mean, the government is very incompetent, I think. So it's very possible, but it seems hard to believe that, given all the opportunities they had, like I said, just get him off the stage. All right. And if it was a conspiracy, then what was it? I said it wasn't Trump or doing it himself or Biden ordering it, right? It would have come from that secret team, right? As Fletcher Prouty calls it. It would have come from some group, some cabal that wanted this to happen for one reason or another. If nothing else, then just to stir up the public, maybe to bolster Trump. And it's very much within their abilities to have programmed this kid to do what he did. Very much. Very much. And nobody will talk about that, right? Because he'll just be called tinfoil hat, even though it's documented in the MK Ultra files and so forth. And, it's very possible that the Secret Service somehow was, those who were in key positions that day kind of looked the other way or kind of, did whatever, or were distracted enough. So anyway, those are my thoughts about it. I had to make this video and just comment on it because it's very interesting to me. It's a very interesting development. I'm following it very closely because it's such a big event and it stinks, it smells like, so it's almost like a very good case study. It's like, here's a big event that happened. It seems so unbelievable that it went down the way it did. And what's the public going to do? How's the public going to process it? And the media and so forth. Will we be critical thinkers or will we, become divided and start calling people, insane and have, left versus right in all this? Let me know what you think. We'll see how this thing develops. Thank you for watching and I'll see you in the next one.